Many people have a fear of meeting an untimely death. On this episode of Never Stop Learning, we're taking a look at 5 people who looked death in the face and refused to accept their fate. They fought to save their own lives, and they beat the odds to survive in the worst of circumstances. Number 5. Christine McKenzie had her worst nightmares realized when her parachute failed to open during her skydive in South Africa in 2004. As she plummeted 11,000 feet towards the earth, she attempted her backup parachute, but she was falling so fast that the lines on the reserve chute snapped, sending her into an uncontrolled spin. She began spiraling and couldn't believe what was happening to her. As she fell, she saw that her horrible situation was about to get even worse. Directly below her were a set of electrical power lines, and as she fell into them, she thought her life was over. She bounced off the power lines, then continued falling until she hit the ground. A passing car witnessed everything and quickly ran over to help her. She survived her ordeal and vowed never to skydive again. Number 4. The Marathon des Sables is without a doubt the most grueling and physically demanding race ever created. Located in the Sahara Desert, this ultramarathon is 251 kilometers of unforgiving wasteland. It is not for the faint of heart, and definitely not a place to take a wrong turn. Mauro Prosperi found this out the hard way when he became lost after a sandstorm knocked him 186 miles off course. He eventually came across an abandoned mosque and survived by drinking the blood of bats as well as his own urine. When he thought he couldn't go on, he even attempted suicide by cutting his wrists, but his blood was so thick from dehydration that he couldn't even bleed out. He took this as a sign that he must survive. He continued walking until he found an oasis. Mauro then was rescued by a nomadic family. In total, Prosperi spent 8 days lost in the desert. This whole ordeal did not discourage him though. He went on to enter the race again 4 years later. Mauro was not going to let the first race hold him back. Number 3. In 2013, Harrison Okene, a Nigerian cook, was working on board a tugboat in the Atlantic Ocean when rough seas caused the entire ship to capsize and sink 30 meters from the surface. In the pitch dark, he managed to find his way to an air pocket inside the overturned vessel, where he sat in total darkness, waiting for death. After almost 2.5 days at the bottom of the ocean, Okene's prayers were answered when he spotted a light. A team of South African divers had come to inspect the vessel and retrieve the bodies. Okene gently reached out his hand to touch the diver's arm, so as not to spook him. He then withdrew his arm and waved. The next challenge was getting Okene safely to the surface. After such a long time this deep in the water, Okene's body had absorbed a potentially fatal amount of nitrogen. Bringing him suddenly to the surface would induce a deadly attack of the bends. The team needed to skillfully readjust the gas levels in Okene's body. They suited him in a diving helmet and guided him to the diving bell. This is designed to maintain internal pressure. Okene lost consciousness during the transfer, but still managed to survive. The bell then brought him safely to the surface, where he spent 2 days in a decompression chamber. He suffered from peeling skin, reoccurring nightmares, and an insatiable hunger, but otherwise, he was in good health. If you've enjoyed this episode so far, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to see everything else this channel has to offer. Number 2. Todd Orr had traveled deep into the mountains of Montana searching for elk when he came across a bear with 2 cubs. He heard a noise behind him, and as he turned to see what it was, he came face to face with a grizzly bear in a full charge headed straight for him. He managed to get off a full blast of bear spray before diving into the bushes. He got up and looked around, amazed that he had just survived a grizzly attack. His arm and shoulder had been lacerated by the bear, but overall, he was still in good shape. Still, 3 miles from the trailhead, he knew he had to get out of there and get to a hospital. He felt incredibly lucky, but little did he know, his luck was about to run out. He heard some bushes snap directly behind him, and before he could even turn around, the bear was on him again. He attempted to protect his head as the bear began ripping into his arm and chewing out his tendons. She bit his arm over 20 times, and as he tried to fight back, she started picking him up and slamming him into the dirt, just trying to rip him apart. As Todd laid there motionless on the ground with the grizzly standing on his back, everything went eerily quiet. The bear sniffed him and looked around before walking off into the bushes, as if nothing had just happened. As Todd wiped the blood from his eyes, he looked around and saw his pistol lying a few feet away. He quickly grabbed it and did a quick scan of the tree line looking for the bear. He knew he was in trouble, and as fast as his battered body would take him, he made his way back to the trailhead where his truck was parked. But before heading to the hospital, he took out his cell phone and made a video that rocketed him to international fame as he recounted his experience. Number 1. In 1985, Joe Simpson and Simon Yates were climbing the Ciula Grande mountain when Joe fell and broke his leg near the summit. Simon was left with the task of getting his severely injured partner to safety. Simon attempted to use his climbing rope to lower Joe 300 feet at a time when Joe unknowingly went off a cliff. Now, at the end of his rope, Joe was hanging over 200 feet in the air. Simon felt the rope go taut, but was unable to see Joe. He listened for his partner, but heard nothing. They sat there for hours, but when the snow that Simon was standing on began to give way, he knew he had to get out of there, or both of them were going to die. He had no choice but to cut the rope. Simon thought he had surely just killed his friend, and with a heavy heart, he continued his descent back to base camp. Simpson, however, was still alive. He had survived the fall of more than 200 feet and had landed on a small ledge inside a crevasse. When he regained consciousness, he discovered that the rope had been cut and concluded that Yates had probably survived, but would presume he was dead. He therefore had to save himself, but he found it impossible to climb back up to the entrance of the crevasse because of the overhanging ice and his broken leg. Therefore, his only choice was to use the remaining rope to descend deeper into the crevasse and hope that there was another way out. After lowering himself, Simon discovered a snow bridge, which he was able to use to get back onto the glacier. From there, Simpson spent 3 days without food and with very little water, crawling and hopping 5 miles or 8 kilometers back to their base camp. Exhausted and delirious, he reached the base camp only a few hours before Yates intended to leave and return to civilization. So that's 5 people who have stared death in the face and managed to live to see another day. If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Until next time, thanks for watching.